the truth is that when we bottle things up inside, we're actually increasing our stress and we're decreasing our own levels of awareness.
Welcome to the Secrets of Being podcast. I'm Dr. Dawn Earhart Whitty, your guide on a transformative journey of personal development and discussions of universal truths. Join me and a panel of life coaches and spiritual leaders from around the world discussing how to handle some of life's greatest challenges. We will be sharing stories of love, faith, and inspiration with you, our faithful listeners, to live your happiest and most fulfilling life, full of purpose and passion for yourself, your families, and the world. We are here to be the change we wish to see. Let the conversation begin. Hello, and welcome to the Secrets of Being podcast. Today, I am honored to have Dr. Chloe Carmichael with us. Dr. Chloe Carmichael has quite an extensive resume. She is the author of 2 best-selling books, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, and Can I Say That? Why Freedom of Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. She unpacks the psychological benefits of free speech and provides practical tools for speaking up as well as listening resiliently. I love that. Dr. Chloe is a fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. She's featured regularly in national media, including CNN, Fox, VH1, and others. She speaks frequently for law firms and other corporations on topics like how to unlock the healthy function of anxiety, how to discuss sensitive topics in the workplace or on campus, and more. Okay, Dr. Chloe, welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Dawn. It's great to be with you.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like this conversation can go so many different ways because your books have tapped into something that I'm very passionate about, is speaking our truth and also dealing with anxiety, because I know a lot of people who have struggled with that. So I wanted to start us off with a quote. And I love Dr. Seuss, and this was the first quote that came to my mind, so I looked it up so I could get it perfect. Dr. Seuss says, "Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind." And I know it's a Dr. Seuss quote, but it is applicable to all of us, whether we're adults or children. So what got you to write this book? Can I say that? Because I feel like we are living in such polarizing times, and there's so much division and discourse. How did you come to write this book, and tell me a little bit about that process?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I actually came to write this book through my own experiences of self-censorship. I just, uh, I guess I'm trying to think of where it all started, but I honestly think it started in college. So I didn't go to college until a little bit later in life. So I was pretty much, used to speaking my mind. I was pretty authentic about who I was. And then when I was in my early mid 20s, I went to Columbia University. I was really excited that I was able to get in there, even though, obviously I wasn't a traditional student. And I felt like a lot of the things that they were talking about, I didn't always necessarily agree with, but I just kind of was like, well, hey, I've never been to college. These are university professors. I'm going to, try and learn something from them. So, that's what I did. And then the same dynamic kind of intensified when I went to get my PhD in clinical psychology. I felt like there were a lot of, narratives and explanations that didn't feel exactly scientific. They felt a little bit more opinion based than anything else. And so I did start to push back a little bit there. But I could tell pretty quickly that it was only going to be me shooting myself in the foot to start arguments with my professors, that it would just go better for me if I just smiled and nodded and, got my doctorate. So that's what I did. And then the dynamic continued when I went to set up my practice. I was really thankful to be getting lots of very big positive media attention, which was obviously great for business. But again, it was just so clear that if they were, say, doing a story on me too, they would want to hear from me as a psychologist about obviously the harms of, sexual harassment, but they would not want to hear anything about, but sometimes women lie or make things up. And so it would just become always very clear to me that I had to do a lot of self-censorship if I wanted to, have my goals of getting my doctorate or having, media relationships. And so it was just kind of a deal with the devil that I tolerated for many years. And the last straw was during COVID when they wanted, my then 3-year-old son was going to have to be masked for, what would have eventually become years on end. And so I left New York and my family and I, we moved to Florida just simply specifically to avoid that. And I was like, okay, well, that's great for me, but what about all the other kids? I almost felt like as a psychologist, I had a duty to speak up. So I did, and it was my first time like really doing or saying anything that I knew was going to, I mean, I got backlash from traditional media, even though I was embraced by alternative media. I got a lot of backlash from colleagues, etc. But I noticed that it felt really good. I noticed that cognitively, I was becoming sharper about the subject because I was having interesting conversations with people, gaining and exchanging and clarifying information, which is one of the functions of language, is it aids our cognitive process. I noticed that emotionally, I was starting to balance out and regulate because I had been all, up in a bunch about it at first because I'd been holding it in for so long. And I noticed that my social relationships were also becoming more supportive because I was really being myself more. And I found out who my real friends were and, who things wouldn't really work out with if I said what I really thought. So all of this added up to me saying, maybe like there's actually something here about the mental health benefits of speaking your mind, which as a psychologist, I shouldn't have been any big shock to me, but yet here we are.
Well, and in one of your podcasts, you said something about learning how to disagree agreeably. And I love that because we've all had different life experiences and we've all had different, different perspectives on different things. So how do we disagree agreeably and
Yeah,
respectfully?
it is so important. Thank you, Dr. Don, for bringing that up. I feel like we've all been taught so long, like don't talk about politics, right? To the point where people forgot how to actually have, political disagreement. And when we think of politics, some people can say, well, I don't do politics, but yet they have an opinion about whether it be abortion or immigration or what to do about crime or what should be taught in schools. So politics at the root of its word just means public life. So anybody who is invested in their community at all on some level, is political. So to your question, then, how do we disagree agreeably? Because these are subjects that matter to us. I think we have to just, first of all, be learning how to really listen to each other. That's some of the techniques in the book explore the fact that when we get agitated, we don't hear and understand people as well. When our heart rate goes above 100 beats per minute, we're cognitively missing stuff. We're just not processing things clearly. That's why people have to practice their fire escape route like super well, because when they're all agitated, they can't think clearly. So I think we disagree agreeably by one of the techniques I share is a couples therapy technique where you just reflect back and repeat what the other person said before you respond with your own side. You just say, "Hey, did I hear you right? Like this is what I heard you say. Is this what you said?" And that slows the conversation down. And it is a sign and a behavior of respect right there, is that you're stopping and you're focusing on what the other person's saying and making sure you understood it. And then you can say, well, would you like to hear what I have to say about it? So, you're giving the other person a choice. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can do it. But the first step, I think, to disagreeing agreeably is to just expect disagreement and then make sure on a behavioral level that we're actually truly listening and hearing the other person, and then making sure that they're actually interested in a dialogue with us, that we're not talking at people.
Yeah, I think I heard you say something about reflective listening. Is that what you're talking about right now? Is and
Yes.
this goes to micro and macro, right? The big public square versus and also including our one-on-one relationships, right? Reflective listening.
Yeah. Well, when you say macro, maybe, I don't know, do you mean like social media or?
I mean, just like public policy and things like that, right? Like the big issues. But I was also thinking about like just one on one, being able to speak your truth to your partner and not, not doing it in an abrasive way, but speaking
Yeah.
your truth calmly, lovingly, but getting your point across without just, because like I was a people pleaser for a long time. I'm a recovering people pleaser. So a lot of times I wouldn't say what I thought, what I felt, what I needed because I didn't want to upset the apple cart. I didn't want to cause a problem. So those are things like how do you suggest people like get past those things so that we don't just agree to get along, without causing
Yeah.
any kind of
Yeah,
ruffles.
totally. So yeah, I would say the reflective listening is more of a micro level on the personal level. And to your point then as a recovering people pleaser yourself, I'm sure what you learned is that by smiling and nodding and pretending to agree with people, we're not even, doing them any favors. We're actually setting ourselves up to become passive aggressive. Because if we can't deal with a conflict directly by saying, oh, well, that's what you think, and I think something else, we disagree, let's deal with that directly. When we're unable or unwilling to handle disagreements directly, we handle them passive aggressively. And so, that's when we're more likely to just be kind of icy to someone or make snipey little remarks towards them or about them. So I think, first of all, understanding that just simply smiling and nodding isn't even truly nice or really truly pleasing to people. And to step out of that, as since you mentioned, like, how can people do that if they feel like they're stuck in the smiling and nodding routine, is sometimes to do just what psychologists call to narrate your experience. So just to set it up to someone to just say, you know what? I just want to say I have had a habit of smiling and nodding about things I don't even always agree with because I'm so afraid of upsetting people. And I'm trying to break out of that. So I want to, share what I really think. Because also we have to realize that if we're holding things back from people because we're assuming that they would, you know, respond inappropriately or in some unmanageable way if we told them what we really think, in a way, we're holding them accountable for a behavior that they haven't even displayed. Like we haven't even given them the chance to hear and receive what we have to say. And we're already prejudging them and saying, oh, well, she couldn't handle what I think, so I won't even go there with her, where it's kind of an insult to the other person. I'm a bit of a recovering people pleaser myself. So I've thought through some of these issues.
Yeah, well, again, I'm working on that one. And again, because we live in, and COVID was the perfect time to shine a light on like how divided we are on absolutely everything. And it got so very passionate on, both sides. And I was like, you know what? I'm out. Like I'm not
Mm,
because it was so uncomfortable. But I did start getting braver and did start speaking my truth because I was like, you know what? I can't not say anything now because this is affecting everybody in the whole globe. It wasn't just like, one country, one state, one city. This was a massive thing. So I think COVID helped me to start speaking my truth, even though I knew
good.
like I'm walking to a place where it's not going to be a friendly opinion. I'm still going to say it.
Hmm.
But so oh my gosh, I have so many questions. So okay, so what I've heard you talk about like what happens physically in your body. You're talking about the amygdala and how like not speaking your truth can physiologically affect us. How does that play out?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that because, again, a lot of people think, well, the low risk way to live my life is to just, not acknowledge if I disagree with people and maybe even pantomime as if I agree with people. And that'll just be the low risk way to live my life. And I, like I said, used to actually kind of think that way too. But the truth is that when we bottle things up inside, we're actually increasing our stress and we're decreasing our own levels of awareness. And, we're even having measurable physiological effects. So, for example, as you mentioned, the amygdala. the mere act of naming our emotions will actually decrease amygdala activity. Amygdala, as you know, is the part of the brain that gets active when we're feeling fearful. And so, it's kind of ironic, but if I talk to you and I name the emotions, if we're having an argument and I name the emotions, that I'm feeling in our argument, it might seem as if, like, well, Chloe, you're escalating because you're talking about this negativity. But what I'm actually doing is I'm helping the amygdala to calm down and I'm being honest. And if I don't do that and the amygdala just keeps going more and more crazy and more fearful, I'm more prone to lash out at you like you're some kind of serious threat to me because I have failed to emotionally regulate myself. One of the ways, again, that we do that is by naming our emotions. And I don't mean like in some kind of abusive way, like, you're making me mad, or, whatever, but more like, I feel frustrated when you say, that I'm this or that, or I feel embarrassed when, you say this or that or the other thing. So naming our emotions does help us to regulate. Also, when we have a heart to heart with somebody, even if it's not necessarily positive, our cortisol levels actually drop because we know we're in a true safe space. Like people sometimes talk about safe spaces. A real safe space is one that can withstand conflict, right? And when we have to keep everything inside, that's when our cortisol levels actually rise and we're going to become, more edgy and more potentially confrontational. So just, something to think about on that regard is, if we're working with violent offenders or anger management clients, one of the first things that we try to do is to get them to learn how to verbalize when they're upset, how to express it at lower levels, and how to navigate and handle conflict verbally, because we know that if people don't navigate conflict verbally, that's when they're actually more prone. And I'm laughing, it's not funny, but that's when they're more prone to be violent. I'm laughing just because of the absurdity of it. It's one of those ironic things that a lot of people, like anger management clients, will come to me. They'll be like, Dr. Chloe, I've been doing my best to hold it all in, and I just tell myself, hold it in, hold it in, hold it in, and then I explode. And they think that their hold it in strategy is a good thing. They're like, I'm doing it, I'm holding it in. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like that's why you're exploding, it's because you're holding it in. So the goal is to learn to have dialogue, but in a respectful way.
Well, and don't tell little kids, use your words, use your
Exactly.
words. And
Exactly.
so I love this because that could also, by holding it all in, that could increase our anxiety. And so your other book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, I love the title of that because I know people that are very, very anxious and there's like, oh, I can't do this because of my anxiety and my anxiety is so high. How do you harness the power of your anxiety? I love that you can like harness it and turn it into a positive.
Yeah, well, you're connecting two important things there because you're right that when we feel like we have to mask what we're really feeling, that's anxiety provoking in and of itself. It's like walking around like you're in the witness protection program or something. It's a lot of mental work to keep up this big performance, right? But to move on to the second part of what you asked is like, how do we harness the power of our anxiety? First of all, just to know that anxiety is part of a healthy psychological makeup. A person without anxiety would not look both ways before they cross the street. The healthy function of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. So, for example, if a person is anxious, a lot of times, again, they'll come to my office and they'll say, I'm trying, Dr. Chloe. I close my eyes and I think of a beach and I take a deep breath, but yet I'm still plagued by anxiety. And I'm like, well, of course, because the goal with anxiety is not necessarily to just try to think about something else and relax yourself. Sometimes the healthy function of that anxiety is to stimulate you to do something about the source of the anxiety. The classic example would be test anxiety. A person with test anxiety is not necessarily going to benefit by closing their eyes and thinking of a beach. They might benefit more. They might resolve that anxiety by making some flashcards and, writing down 10 questions that they think will appear on the test and then creating answers to those questions. Now, once you've done everything that you can do, once you've honestly said to yourself, there's really no more preparation behaviors I can take here. Now I just have some residual anxiety. Then you have two choices. You can either come up with a new goal and just divert that excess energy towards that new goal, or then you can go ahead and do those beach visions and deep breathing and just relax, just to calm yourself down after the fact. Um, but again, it's like if you get a credit card bill in the mail and it has a balance you don't like, closing your eyes and thinking of a beach is not going to help. What it means is that you need to do something to address, your earning or your spending or, something more behavioral about the actual source of the anxiety.
Well, and then anxiety also is on levels, right? There's like the minor anxiety where you get a little bit nervous or something, but then there are the people that have like such symptoms that they go to the hospital thinking they're having a heart attack. So, what is the difference in those people? What are they experiencing? How do they get from just the mild anxiety to like, thinking they're dying? And how do you for somebody who's at the severe end,
Mm.
what kind of things can they do to, I mean, first I would think recognizing it for what it is probably the first step. But what other things are important for people to do to help learn them to get them down?
Yeah, so there's three categories that I share in the book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, and that book is actually now in 5 languages, which is amazing. Um, and so with panic disorder, um, there's some really interesting and differing opinions about it. And I don't think it's a one size fits all situation. So for some people that may just truly have some kind of a hair trigger physiology, maybe for some of those people, medication or, just simple breathing exercises are helpful. And I share a technique in the book called anchoring statements, because for some people, when they have a panic attack, they genuinely think that they're dying. And like you said, that's why they end up in the emergency room. So for those types of situations, sometimes, thought replacements like, I've been through this before and I'll be fine in 2 minutes, or um, simple statements like my head is above my shoulders are above my waist is above my feet, those just to even reactivate, interestingly, the gift of language when they feel like they lose their gift of language and it becomes harder to process, because they're panicking, and it becomes a kind of a vicious circle. But there's a whole other side to it, which I have found in my experience as a clinical psychologist is oftentimes helpful to explore, which is the psychodynamic side. So a lot of times what is underneath the panic disorder is that somebody's been pushing something into the back of their head. So we do repression and suppression and denial to the point where we dissociate from what's really bothering us. The unconscious is pre-verbal and it's out of awareness. So, you know, I'll often, if I have a panic disorder client, they'll usually come in and they'll come across like the most relaxed people in the world, and they'll say, "I don't know. There's nothing. No, nothing's bothering me," and they mean it. Um, and that's almost a telltale sign, because your average person can articulate usually what are their sources of stress, what are the things that are bothering them, etc. But when you keep pushing it out of your awareness and stuffing it down, then you're not aware of it, and so it just kind of bursts forth in a panic attack, um, from the unconscious, and so it is preverbal and it comes out somatically through the body because your conscious mind refuses to address it, and so that's just almost like the only way it can come out. So sometimes with panic disorder, it can actually be helpful for people to spend, you know, 20 minutes or at the end of every day just journaling everything that happened today and asking themselves how they felt about it, just to deliberately try to stimulate emotional awareness of what's bothering them so they can deal with it consciously instead of having it kind of erupt through a panic attack that seems to come out of nowhere, but has actually been brewing in the back of their head for some time.
Yeah, and not only does it come out in panic attacks, sometimes it comes out in dis-ease in our bodies too when we're
Mm.
repressing things and suppressing things so much. So those are really good hints, journaling and then feeling our feelings about the things that we're feeling instead of just saying, no, I'm okay. Because how many people do that all the time? Or somebody's crying because something really sad happened to them. They're like, oh, I'm sorry. We've been taught to like put our feelings down and squash them. And it does manifest in other ways in our lives. So
Totally.
journaling is always a good way to do that. And again, be expressive about it, right? Like say if you're mad about, get the anger out, get it out from inside and put it out, not at other people, but just say it out loud.
Yeah, saying it aloud is super helpful, or, writing it down as well is just another way of expressing it. And I do share a technique in the Nervous Energy book too called mind mapping, which people can also find just by Googling about mind mapping. Because a lot of times, again, people that have that issue of panic disorder, if it is due to a resistance to processing feelings and stuff, the idea of sitting down and writing in a journal for 20 minutes, like they want to puke. And so, with the mind map, like you just would take like put in the middle of the page like my day with a circle around it, and then just draw a few spokes out and like what are the first three things that come to mind? Went to the office, had a fight with Jill, and went to the gym. And then, you draw some spokes out from those things to say like what are the first three, thoughts or feelings that occur about those things. And so then you're just kind of hitting it from more of a skeleton outline instead of, forcing yourself to like construct sentences about self-reflection. That's usually the last thing that people with panic disorder want to do.
Well, that's great. That's a great idea for somebody who doesn't like to write. And, it again, it puts the thoughts out and it lets you see where it is your attention's going and what you're feeling about the things that you're experiencing. So I
Mhm.
love I love those ideas. Dr. Chloe, you've been a wonderful guest. I could have you on for hours and hours, but could you tell everybody where they can find you and also leave people with like one nugget you want them to take away from your books, your practice, or just your very being?
Yeah, thank you so much. So my website is drchloe.com, but I know that's kind of a mouthful to spell. So since I'm super into free speech anyway right now, I just made the URL freespeechtoday.com will forward to my website. So if people go to freespeechtoday.com, then they can get all of my books, information, and socials, follow me on social, connect with me there. But the one takeaway I want people to have today is that free speech is good for mental health. And again, with anxiety, the healthy function is to stimulate preparation behaviors. And language is one of our primary ways to create preparation plans. So in a way, these books, they kind of complement each other. My previous book was about dating with high functioning people. And sometimes people are like, what do dating, anxiety, and free speech have to do together? But what they all have to do together is that when you have intelligent people with active minds, these tend to be complex topics and they do actually kind of knit together.
Oh, I'm going to need to get that book. Well, thank you again so much for being on Secrets of Being podcast.
Thanks, Dr.
And
Don.
we'll have all of your contact information in our show notes. And thank you all for watching this episode of Secrets of Being. Thank you for tuning in to the Secrets of Being podcast. We appreciate your time and support. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with more inspiring content. For further inspiration, visit thesecretsofbeing.com and join our community. Until next time, stay inspired and keep unlocking the secrets of being.